Welcome to RePlay Magazine's podcast, where we'll dive into the legends and interesting stories within the world of what we call coin-op entertainment. That's games and amusement machines you find in arcades, fun centers, bars, restaurants, and beyond. RePlay's covered this business for 50 years and is joining forces with industry veteran and former association president Randy Chilton. He is Chief Revenue Officer for National Entertainment Network, owned by Japanese amusement giant Kittleton Genda. And now, here's Randy and this month's RePlay podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to, I believe it's episode 7 of our RePlay Magazine podcast. And the interviews just keep getting more and more interesting. This is such a joy for me to hear their stories. Today, we're talking to Malcolm Steinberg of LAI Games, Timezone Arcades, and a whole list of other companies. Embed, him and his son Adam lead the company, based out of Perth, Australia. So this was 5 p.m. my time and 7 p.m. tomorrow, or yesterday, 7 a.m. his time. So anyway, we had a great chat, and I hope you enjoy Malcolm. His story is just incredible. He's 86 years old and sharp as a tack, as you will see as you listen to him tell his stories about starting out with 16 pinball machines in 1958 and how he parlayed that. And as I said, as we talk about, his international presence, he goes into new countries like U.S. operators go into new counties. I mean, it's unbelievable how he has figured out how to do this on an international basis. He now runs all-in companies. It's $1 billion in annual sales if you lump all of them together. He's got a fascinating story about his Malka Foundation, which is an honor to his grandmother, which is where Malcolm spends most of his time. Adam runs the day-to-day operations as a CEO of the organization, but you hear a lot of passion around being able to give back to entrepreneurs, new venture capital funds they've created, and it's just such a joy to hear his story. And he has all the numbers, he has all the data. We had to do a lot of homework to keep up with him and his sharp mind. But I hope you enjoy it. But before we go straight into that, I do want to make a shout out to my friends at RePlay Magazine for making this possible. Keith Snodgrass, who does a fantastic job of making all this make sense and helping bring the right people to the table. And to Chad Jameson, who eliminates all of my misstatements and does a great job producing and editing this podcast on a monthly basis. So Chad Jameson, if you ever need a great editor or have a similar project, he's your guy. So thank you to both Key and to Chad. I wanted to put that out there and enjoy my chat with Malcolm Steinberg. Thank you. So welcome, Malcolm Steinberg. It's just a huge honor. I want to read something here because one of the favorite things about doing these podcasts is I learn a lot about people like you and the stories about others that we've talked to. And your story is fascinating. I want to make sure I have this right. LAI Games, Matahari Leisure, Embed, Booking Boss, Zone Bowling, Kingpin FECs, Arcade XR, and now you have your very own charitable foundation, the Malka Foundation. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you pretty well got it all there, Randy.
And then just to put a bullet on that, you operate in 10 countries. You've got 160 entertainment venues, 9,000 employees, and you're $1 billion business.
Yeah, we've actually got 360 venues.
Oh,
in 7 countries. Yeah, everything else is accurate. Yeah. What
a fascinating career, and I'm just really looking forward to hearing you talk about it. You're a very well published guy. I mean, your story's been heard over Australia. I watched some of your interviews over a couple 100,000 times, so your story is well told. But let's just jump. We can't talk about your story without the great beginning in 1958. What would you tell us about that?
Well, it started by chance actually, because I'd left school. I'd left high school at the age of 16 because I really wanted to get out into the commercial world, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I got a job in an accounting firm as an audit clerk, and I didn't like that because we used to go out on audits, and the auditor would call numbers, and I'd tick them off. And every now and again he'd call a wrong number, I'd tick it off anyhow. So I knew that wasn't for me. And then I worked for my dad for a few months, who was in the furniture business. And, like any father and son relationship, the son always thinks he knows better. And one day my dad said, well, son, maybe you should find something else. And so I went to Melbourne on a holiday with a friend, and while I was there, an uncle of mine in Newcastle, which is about 100 miles north of Sydney, invited me to visit the family. Unbeknown to me, he was in the games business. And to cut a long story short, the weekend turned into 3 months, and I came back to the West Coast with 21 pinball machines and started the company in April 1958. So that's how it got started.
Now, that initial business, you were in partner with your uncle Alec, correct?
That's
and
right.
Your dad?
Uncle Alec Hankin, yeah, and my dad. They owned 40% each, and I had 20%. And I I bought Alec Hankin out a few years later, and then my dad split his equity between myself and my brother, and I bought my brother out in the early 80s. So
now, was that your brother Gordon?
Gordon, yeah.
Okay.
He's since passed, unfortunately. Yeah.
Out of everything I read about you, I don't know your dad's name. What is your dad's name?
Morris.
Morris. And your wife is Frances. Do you have any other children, or
yes,
does Gordon have any siblings?
I have 2 sons, Adam and Dean, and a daughter, Jessica. Adam runs the business now. He's the CEO of the group. He's been with the company now about 32 years.
Yeah, I read a lot about him. He's an interview all by himself. You guys make a great
really
team.
knows the business well. Yeah.
So I'm a big family business guy, and people in this industry are big family business. So you've been in business with your son, your brother, your dad. How is that? Obviously, it's worked out to some level, but is that how did that work out? Did that have its challenges, or did y'all get along great? Most don't.
No, we pretty much got along all fine. Yeah, that's. I think that in hindsight, if I had my time all over again, I think I would have done things a little differently, because I think being the CEO, the founder and CEO for over 50 years is just too long. If you look at the really successful companies in the world today, not too many have CEOs that are there for more than 7 to 10 years. And I think that, business, no matter what business you're in, it's a team sport, and the team leader, the captain or the coach, has to be a very creative person, because you've got to come up with new ideas to find new ways and new directions for the business. And I think that's why it makes sense to change the leadership, certainly every 7 to 10 years. We did that 8 years ago, and in terms of our FEC business. And in that time, in those 8 years, the business has gone from about 200 locations to 360. So, that's added a lot of growth in that time.
No, it's a remarkable story. And is your wife Frances still with us?
Yes, she is. Yes.
Well, how many years you been married? That's
We've been married 63 years. Yeah.
Now we're getting to the good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. That's a big number.
It is.
Big number. And she's been involved in the business
She was
made numerous
originally,
references.
when I first started the business, about 2 years after I started, I met her, and then she came in and worked as an administrator and financial controller. But she retired when we got married a couple of years later. But she was very much involved in the early days.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on 63 years.
Thank you.
You dropped out of, I'm going to go back here to you. You dropped out of school at 16 years old. Now, for all of us that spend hundreds of thousands of dollars sending our children to college, did you ever go, wow, I really wish I knew this, or I knew that, or I really wish I would have stayed in school or gone back to school? Or did you just never skip a beat when it comes to education?
Yeah, look, I think, I left school because it really didn't interest me. I wanted to get out into the commercial world. But in hindsight, I would have preferred to have had a better education. I think it would have served me better. Not that I'm complaining, I've done very, very nicely, but I think to have a really good education, particularly in the business world, is a significant asset.
Yeah, well, that's pretty remarkable that you did what you did.
Yeah.
So at what point along this journey, I mean, there's a lot of people, my father included. 16 pinballs sounded like my father's story coming out of the World War II. But we didn't quite get to $1 billion. At what point along that journey did you go, man, this could be really big? Or was that your goal from day one? I don't know.
Well, it wasn't, when you start a business at the age of 18, you certainly never envisage you're going to have $1 billion business at any time in the future. In fact, I think my original goal back in 1958 was to generate $100,000 a year in sales. And I didn't see much opportunity beyond that. But as things grow and time goes on, we started operating games in other states in Australia. And in the 90s, we moved into Asia. And also during that decade, we started a business in the US selling games. So it just evolves, I mean, as you make certain achievements, you see new opportunities and you push ahead to achieve them. So it's an evolution. It's not a specific intention when you start. It evolves over time.
Yeah, well, as I said, it's certainly a great story. I was you were in what I read about you and some of your other interviews, you were very transparent. You almost lost it all a couple of times. Tell me about that.
Yeah, there were two occasions. The first one was I had a dispute with the Australian Tax Office, what you call the IRS.
Right.
And a significant litigation occurred as a result of that. And it went on for 7 years. We won eventually, but that caused a lot of damage. It almost sent the business bankrupt. And that was in 1983. And in 1990, the late 90s, I had an issue with our bankers. The owners of the bank I dealt with changed hands, and the new owners didn't like the games business. So they wanted me to pay down my debt, and that caused a lot of hardship and financial pressures. But I got through them both and survived. So it's just a question of, when you're in the right and you're doing the right thing, you persevere with it and you get there.
Yeah, nobody builds a business like you have without a few bumps along the road.
Oh, of course not. No.
Yeah, and you talk about your friend Brian Coppen,
yeah. Coppen. Brian was a great friend. He's since passed. He wasn't in this business. He was in other businesses, but he was a very clever entrepreneur. I didn't know him very well at the time. But in the 80s, when I got in trouble with the tax office, he called me one day and said, he said, I heard you got a few problems. And I said, that would be an understatement. I said, I've been to every bank and loan shark, to try and get finance to get me through this, but it's getting increasingly difficult. And he took me along to see his banker. And I said, I've already been to that bank, Brian. He said, no. He said, I know the bank manager very well. So he took me along, and we went to the ivory tower bank manager's office on the top floor of the building. And the bank manager, he explained my predicament. And the bank manager said, how much does he need? And I said, $5 million facility. And he said to Brian, will you guarantee it? And Brian said, if I have to. And he said, done deal, let's have a drink. So it was that easy. So it just goes to show, it's when you've got good connections, it can make a world of difference. And that really saved the business at that time.
A friend that signs for you, that's a friend.
That is a friend. That is a friend, yeah. Yeah, so that was a warming experience, I have to tell you. But I've seen, the industry has certainly changed a lot over the years. I think there are a lot of things that are holding it back. And I think it could do a lot better if some of those things changed. Because, coin-op games have been around since the turn of the 20th century. They used to be, you'd see them on amusement piers and boardwalks and places like that. They weren't really in the retail sector because I guess they had a sort of stigma attached to them, and they weren't really seen as a retail opportunity. But then in the 1970s, that all changed when the major manufacturers at the time, which were all Japanese, being, Sega, Namco and Taito, they started developing these really quality products, and there wasn't enough retail market or FECs to absorb their production. So they started to develop their own FECs. In other words, they got into the B2C side of the business, and they also started to export their products around the world. So they built a huge FEC operation in Japan, and they started to spread that. In fact, you may recall that I think Namco at one stage operated about 400 arcades in the US.
Yes, they did. And another 1,000 locations.
It spread very rapidly. But what happened was that in 1975, if you wanted to play an interactive game, it had to be a coin-operated game. There was no online services. There were no home game consoles. There were only arcade games, pinball machines, football tables, and various other devices. So the coin-op market owned 100% of the interactive game market. Today, they own 10% because we're a $25 billion business, and the home game market, which is mainly online today, is a $255 billion business. So we just got killed in the rush. And I think the reason for that is that when content production, in other words, the game manufacturers, separated from the retail FEC operators, the way our industry works, which is quite different to, say, the cinema industry, where the content producer gets a share of the box office. The content producer in our industry sells at a fixed price, the best price they can get based on the competition available in the market. And I think a really good example of that is our stacker game, which we produced about 20 years ago.
How many of those did you make?
20,000. 20,000 stacker machines. And it generated about $70 million in sales. And we made a lot of money out of it. I'm not suggesting we didn't do well. But when you look at those 20,000 machines, in 3 or 4 years following the introduction, they earned more than $3 billion in revenue for the operators. So when you look at the apportionment, you get 3 billion going to the operators and 70 million going to the content developer. And that's where I see the problem in the industry today. There's not enough being invested in research and development for content development because of the way it's structured. Now, the people that run our FEC operation are probably thinking right now, I wish he'd shut his mouth. We don't want to give any more of our revenue away. But the reality is that if more revenue can go towards the content producer, it'll be a win-win situation, because the quality of product will increase so much that the revenues will grow sufficiently to more than offset any cost to the retailer or the FEC operator. And I think that's the reason why we've gone from 10% of the market to from 100% of the market to 10% of the market in 50 years. And I think it'll work out in time. It's a slow process. It's hard to change established ways of doing things, but I really think the industry would benefit if we can invest more in content development. I'll give you a story. In the late 90s, I was the distributor in Australia for Sega. And at that time, they were just introducing their Dreamcast game home console. Mm-hmm. And I was up there visiting in Japan, and I met with Hayao Nakayama and his chairman at the time. And they told me that that they were competing with PlayStation and Nintendo, and they needed to generate better quality graphics on their home console. And they were working with this startup company that they thought could really develop some quality chips to achieve that objective, so they'd be more competitive. But the startup was looking for some capital. Would I be interested in investing? And I said, how much are they looking for? He said, they want to sell half the company for $5 million. And I said, well, I don't have $5 million to invest. He said, well, you don't have to invest $5 million. You can take a part of it. And I said, well, I'm in the arcade business, so I'm not really looking to get into the home game business. So we changed the subject, and anyhow, Sega put the $5 million up, and a year later, the company went public, and they got $15 million back for their $5 million, which is it's not unusual to hear those kinds of growths in the public company scene. That's not so remarkable. What is remarkable, Randy, is the name of that company is NVIDIA. True story. No way. Yeah.
Jensen Huang.
Yeah, that was the worst call I ever made in my life, but there you go.
Wow, that's
pretty remarkable.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
NVIDIA, the chip maker, is what you're saying. Or do I have that wrong?
NVIDIA, the $4.2 trillion company.
I met him about 6 months ago. Jensen Huang.
Jensen Huang, yeah.
You run in those circles, but this is a big deal for me. He got his start. He sketched out his business plan in a booth in the back of a Denny's in San Jose, California. So we were a provider to Denny's, and he showed up at one of their conventions, and he stayed all night, and he had dinner with us, and he danced with us, and very, very humble trillionaire.
Well, he over the years, because he had to raise capital, he had to dilute his holding from 100% initially, and today he owns about 3.6%. But that 3.6% is worth about 160 billion. Yeah. So, he's done pretty well out of it, even though he's been heavily diluted, because he never had the cash when the business was growing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I never knew the connection between those companies. That's a great story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I didn't know either. because, going back to 1997, I'd forgotten all about it. But a year or so back, I was just doing a bit of surfing on Google, and I looked up NVIDIA, and it tells this story about Sega buying this equity in 1997. I thought, gee, where's that? I know all about that.
Oh, my goodness.
There you go.
Well, that's great. In your in some of your interviews, you said, "Man, I wish I was 35 years old again, go do it all again." So, and in the same sentence, you're talking about the cinema structure where the manufacturer shares in the cash pan.
Yeah.
You think that model actually has legs in our industry? You think we'd ever get around to it?
Well, it'll be a slow process, but I do think that the content development side of the business needs to invest a lot more capital. Because, look what we've done with the capital that we've got. We've produced some pretty amazing content. But I think now with modern technology, especially artificial intelligence, I think we're capable of producing experiences never previously imagined possible. But it takes a lot of capital, mainly in manpower time. Mm-hmm. But you've got to invest that kind of capital to produce the content. And I think if we can do that, then both the content development side of the business and the retail side of the business will both jointly benefit. So one way or another, look, in the heady days of, Space Invader and Pac-Man, where they were making 100,000 machines, 200,000 machines, I think Taito finished up producing 300,000 Space Invaders altogether. It didn't really matter because, first of all, it was generating so much revenue from the sale of games. And companies like Taito, for example, and Namco were operating enormous numbers of these games. So the question really didn't come up. It's only when things normalised and, we went back to much smaller production runs. Today, a production run of 1,000 of a game is considered a good result. But in those days, I remember reading articles where in Japan where they actually ran out of 100 yen coins because the coinage was being absorbed by the Space Invader boom. Yeah, so things are different today.
One thing, having been in this industry a while and know a lot of manufacturers, a lot of operators, a lot of distributors, it always amazes me. Manufacturers always think the operator makes too much money in the proposition. The operator always thinks the manufacturer makes too much money in the proposition. I'm not sure who's right, but
well, it's at one time, back in the 70s, there were combined manufacturers and operators, and that doesn't exist today. All the operators are independent of the manufacturers. So in that sense, there's a bit of a contest going on, for market share. So I can understand, the feelings of both sides. Both sides, they think they should get a bigger piece of the pie. But at the end of the day, if giving game content development a bigger piece of the pie results in a substantial growth in revenues overall, then it'd be a win-win.
I don't know if this is a good analogy, but it kind of sounds like the legalized gaming that's proliferating throughout the U.S., where the state lottery may take half the money, but it's so much that everybody wins. The operator wins, the location wins, even with the state taking a big chunk of the cash pan. Yeah. And I know a few of those guys, and they're doing just fine, the operators.
Oh, I think when, that $255 billion number doesn't include gambling or lotteries. That's just pure amusement devices. Yeah, so if you take that, another good analogy is that, 20 years ago, 100% of the gambling market was in casinos and clubs and various other venues. Now it's dropped to 70%, because 30% of gambling revenue is generated online. Whereas in the FEC business, the FEC segment of the market generates virtually no revenue online. That's changing, by the way. I don't know whether you read up on our newest business, which is Arcade XR, that runs that site, arcadeonline.com.
Your online arcade business.
Yeah, it's new, it's growing. We think that's got a lot of potential opportunity.
Well, let me say out loud what everybody who's listening to this right now is saying. They're saying that Malcolm is sharp as a tack. You are pulling data and numbers as good as anybody I've known at any age. Which leads me to one of my questions is, you seem like you're a data-driven guy when it comes to your big decision, or are you more of a gut-feeling entrepreneur guy?
I think I started off as a gut feeling, but today it's all data-driven. You know, it's we generate an enormous amount of data within our own systems, and we subscribe to major data production services in all the markets that we operate. So it's very much a data-driven business today.
Yeah, and you seem to have a great handle on it. I'm a little envious. You're putting stats out there that I'm learning from you. So thank you for sharing them. You know, one thing that as I read about you and Adam and how you guys have grown the business, you go into new countries like we go into new counties. I mean, you're a worldwide organization, and I can't even imagine opening up. Our company certainly does some international business, but not without challenges, is it? I mean, when you go into Malaysia, you go into China, I know you had some wins and losses there, but you seem to do that with a great level of confidence and competence.
Well, you know, it was really driven by the evolution of the home game market, because in the 1980s and early 1990s, I could see that the home games are going to have a big impact on our business in Australia. And it wasn't anywhere near as developed in Southeast Asia. So that's when we decided to go into, I was coming home on a trip to London in 1993, and I stopped over in Singapore, which at that time under Lee Kuan Yew didn't allow arcades. And I was walking down Orchard Road, and to my amazement, I see this arcade operating. So I made inquiries, and I found out that his successor, Go Chok Tong, had changed the rules and allowed arcades. So I said to our manager in Sydney, I said, how'd you like to go to Singapore and start a business? And he said, sure, but I'll need a couple of weeks to get organised to get up there. I said, that's fine. Well, in that 2 weeks, the market had gone from one arcade to 14 in Singapore in 2 weeks. 13 new arcades had opened. So he got in there and started bidding for leases, for retail leases. I remember him telling me the story that he put a bid in for a retail lease at, I think it was at the time, $1.60 per square foot per month. And he didn't hear from the realtor, and he called a couple of weeks later and he said, how was my bid? Did anybody, because he put a bid in slightly lower, and he said, did somebody pay the full price? He said, oh, no. He said they paid $2.20 a foot. So we learned what competition was in Asia. I mean, it was so aggressive in Singapore that we finished up becoming a distributor in the first 2 years, while these Singapore entrepreneurs were fighting each other to get access to suitable sites. And like anything that gets overdone, you get a collapse. And we were fortunate enough to be able to buy up a lot of these sites a couple of years later when they overstretched themselves. So that's how we got started in Asia. And then a couple of years later, we went to Indonesia, then the Philippines, Then we went to China. Unfortunately, that was in 2002. They had a one-child policy where the child was only allowed out for 1 hour on a Sunday. And we used to do 85% of our business on a Sunday, and the rest of the week, 15%. It just wasn't enough. So we decided to call it quits. And 2 years later, they eliminated the one-child policy, and now China is the biggest world market for the arcade business, both in content development and retail operations. So it's amazing how markets changed.
Yeah, that's amazing. A question for you. You've got all these companies, and I know you're privately held, so I don't want you to disclose any hard numbers to us. But I would expect, and I want to talk about Embed as well. Friday, I didn't know you created Embed as a company, so this is a big learning for me. But
is that
out
right?
Of all
that
the
was
companies,
actually my son Adam that created that company because
well,
we were struggling with coins in our
right.
FEC business, and he went around the world looking for a payment system. And he went to is it Argentina where Socorro are? And they couldn't come to an agreement. And he came back and he said, I think we're going to have to develop our own system. And that's how Embed evolved. Yeah.
Like father, like son. No, I'm very familiar with Embed. We bought Embed systems for our company and operate them. I just didn't know the connection. So thank you. It's a great system.
Yeah, no, it is. They operate. I think they're in more than 3,000 locations around the world now. And so I think the US is probably their biggest market.
How do I want to ask this question? I want to get some understanding of, out of all these companies, was it LAI, the game manufacturing? Was it the time zone locations that contributed mostly to the size of your company? What were the really big winners?
Yeah, well, the time zone, which includes some other brands, like Kingpin, which is like it's kind of a cross between Dave & Buster's and Main Event. And then we have another product called Play and Learn, which is a kiddies thing.
Mm-hmm.
But the most of the stores are time zone branded, or zone bowling, which is our bowling operation.
Right.
We have, as I said, we had 360 venues in 7 countries, but certainly that business is probably 80% of our total business today.
Oh, okay. The time zone. Good. Yeah. All right. Thank you for sharing that. I wouldn't mind shifting gears here a little bit. I Googled before we got on the call. Talk about a great time to be alive. You and I are 10,000 miles apart as we speak. Me just outside Boulder, Colorado, and you're in Perth, Australia. And were you born in Perth, Australia?
I was, yeah. I was born.
So you've lived there your whole life. You traveled the world. You always end up back in Perth. Did you ever think, man, I need to move to California, or I need to move to London, or you've just always been
I've always been based in Perth. I spent a little time in Sydney when we were developing our operations on the East Coast here. But I came back to Perth, and I've been here ever since.
What is a day in your life in Perth like today?
Oh, today, well, I don't hold. My role in the business is non-executive. I chair the 4 corporate structures that we have, but I'm very involved in the Malka Foundation, which is an organisation which is dedicated to helping young startup entrepreneurs, both in terms of education and funding. We work with 4 major universities here in Western Australia, 2 incubator organisations, and 2 education organisations, and we're putting about $4 million a year into funding these developments, and it's having a tremendous impact on the economy, because we're this state is a resource-driven economy. The backbone of our economy is the mining industry, mainly iron ore, and that accounts for about 45% of our economy. But we're getting more competition in iron ore from Brazil and West Africa. So I think the opportunity for the technology industry to replace the resource industry over the next 10 or 15 years is there very clearly, and we're working very closely with government to try and achieve that objective. I mean, if you look at, just to give you, out of our state, there's 3 companies which are multi-billion-dollar companies that have evolved through technology over the last 10 years. One you've probably heard of called Canva, C-A-N-V-A. Another one is called Learning Machines, which was developed by a guy called Andrew Tulloch, who came out of high school here in Perth. He now lives in Silicon Valley. And another one called VGW, Virtual Gaming World, which is a multi-billion-dollar company based in Perth, which is in the gambling business, and does most of its business in the US. So we've generated quite a few what we call unicorn companies out of Perth, and I think the technology is going to drive that, and we're going to see a big change in the role that technology plays in the economy over the next decade or so. If you've got a really good idea and a laptop to start, you don't need a lot of capital, because capital will always follow opportunity. But if you've got a really good idea and a laptop, you can create $1 billion enterprise in 10 years. And those 3 companies I mentioned, Canva, VGW, and Learning Machines, they're all multi-billion dollars, and they all evolved in the last 10 years. So, I mean, it's exciting times. And the reason I'm so excited about it is not because it's an opportunity to create wealth. It's because I think the quality of life, wherever you live in this world, is directly related to the gross domestic product generated by the community. That's what funds everything. And the more wealth that can be created, the greater the quality of life. And your American population are the greatest example of that, because you've only been going less than 250 years, and you're the greatest and biggest economy in the world. And that just proves that if you generate wealth, you improve the quality of life. It's not that you don't have other problems, but in terms of life quality, it's a pretty admirable situation that is developed in the US, in my opinion.
Yeah, this capitalist concept seems to be working more than it's
It works, yeah.
You said a guy needs a laptop and a big idea. Well, I got half the equation. Got the laptop. Now I just need the big idea.
Well, that's, it's, I guess, in life, how many times have we said, "Oh, that's a good idea," and then forgot about it? They're out there. It's just a question of latching on, focusing, and working on it. Well, I have what I call the WINE principle. WINE being an acronym, with W meaning watch out for opportunities and recognise one when you see it. I being immediately make plans to take advantage of that opportunity. And that's all the things like market research and business plan and people and funders and everything, getting everything into place. N stands for never procrastinate on the implementation of those plans. And the E stands for one simple word, which is the key to the whole process, in my opinion. That's execution. You've got the plan becomes a living document, which is evolving all the time. And the challenge for the founder is to faithfully execute that plan, not to be distracted in any way. And if you can, I believe if you can follow those 4 pathways, you're going to develop a very successful enterprise.
So W is for watch
out for opportunities.
Yeah. Watch out. I is immediately react to it. Go.
Take action to develop business plans, funding, people, all the other things that go with it. The N is never procrastinating. Yeah, get onto it. And the E is the execution part of it.
Oh, I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
I heard that on one of your other podcasts, and I'd written it down, and I was going to ask you about it. So thanks for walking through that. It's good to have that guiding principle throughout your whole organization. And obviously, you got a bunch of great people that work in your organization out of your
very fortunate. Yeah, we have
folks. Just compliments you on that before I start going down your executive roster, but know a handful of them, and it's a very impressive, talented group.
Yeah, well, people are the basis of the execution process. It's like a sporting team. I mean, if you look at any sporting team, whether it be football or baseball or soccer or whatever, athletically, all the players are the same. It's the execution of the process that determine who wins or not, and that's what it's all about.
Doesn't matter if you can't execute it.
No, it doesn't work. Yeah, I mean, Elon Musk was quoted as saying once that a startup is like looking into the abyss and chewing glass. And I think he's got a point.
You can relate to that.
I can relate to that, yeah.
All right. I want to ask you, let me get to my notes. This is really interesting to me, having been in a variety of different configurations of corporate businesses. In 2017, you went from owning it all yourself to bringing on Quadrant Private Equity, a very large Australian private equity firm. Yeah. How has that been?
That's been fantastic, because not only were they able to help us with capital raising, but their experience in a diversity of businesses added a lot of value at the board level in terms of executing processes, coming up with new ideas. Since that venture started in 2017, the business has grown exponentially during that period. So, in other words, my half of the business today, of that business, is probably worth, today it's got to be worth 10 times what 100% was worth 7 years ago. So it's certainly been a very successful partnership.
Well, that's a credit to you and a credit to Adam, because that's not how that story usually ends in my experience. Because as an entrepreneur, you and Adam get up every morning, hey, we're going to do this. Well, now you got a 50% partner. You got to go convince 5 other guys it's a good idea. And and I've seen that not work particularly well in my career.
I've seen it fail too. But in our particular case, it's been a marriage made in heaven, because we've got on it. I mean, look, I think any business, any partnership that's successful is going to be a good relationship. It's the ones that get into rough waters where the tensions and the disagreements occur. But I think because we just happen to pick some really good people, and because together we've been very successful, the relationship's been excellent.
Well, and another loaded question, what I know about private equity, and which is limited, but in my experience, they buy to sell, they buy to exit, buy to hold and be partners for a lifetime. Yep. What is the, and this ties into what is the future for Entertainment and Education Group, which is the company that you created with that private equity investment. Where does this go from here over the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Well, you're quite right. Private equity companies generally exit within 5 years. And they've looked at selling equity in the business, selling their equity. I haven't been keen to sell because I still think there's a lot of upside in the business. But they haven't been able to get the price they want, so they've taken the unusual decision to stay with it because the business is still growing and the asset is still increasing in value year by year. So they're very comfortable about. They're now in their 7th year, so eighth year, in fact.
Right.
And they're quite happy to hang in there until the right opportunity presents itself.
Well, that sounds like a great partnership.
It is, yeah. Very, very fortunate, actually.
I've got one more thing I want to talk about, and then I'll let you get on with your day. It's 7 a.m. where you are and 5 p.m. here, and good job you kept a sales guy in the office past 5 p.m.
Well, we didn't have a lot of choice, did we, because of the time difference?
No, hey, this little podcast experiment has turned out to be a real labor of love. Getting to talk to people like you is just a great experience. In any normal walk of life, we're probably not doing this, and I really enjoy it. I really appreciate it. But one of my questions is, you have received the Lifetime Achievement Award. You are in the Hall of Fame of the AAMA. You were not only in the inaugural class, you were the first non-American to be inducted into either. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes, that is my, in terms of, if you want to know what I think I've achieved in the industry, they're the two greatest things that have happened to me in my 67 years in this business. To get recognised from a country on the other side of the world and being the first foreigner to do that is I'm very humble and appreciative of that, because I didn't expect it to happen, but it did, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, that's a big honor, and just incredibly well deserved.
Well, we all want to be loved, and that's in a commercial sense, that's the greatest expression of love that you can give, to recognise somebody, and it's certainly been the highlight of my business career.
Yeah, I agree. We all just want to be loved. It's a good way to put a cap on it. Do you still? Do you still travel? Do you tend the shows, the industry shows, or do you stay pretty close to home?
Not as much.
What's your travel?
I used to travel when I was running the business. I used to travel 3 weeks out of 4 out of the country. But as I said, I'm almost 86, so I'm just not physically capable of doing that. But I do try to get to. We used to go to Sydney or Singapore every month for a board meeting. And then COVID made us realise that you don't have to do that. You can do it just like we're communicating today. So we don't travel for board meetings anymore. But I do try to get to IAPA every year. I'm not going this year, unfortunately, because it clashes with my granddaughter's wedding here in Perth. So I was threatened with divorce if I wasn't here for the wedding. So I won't be there this year, but I think I've been there every year. And I used to go to the shows in Japan and Korea and China and all over, every year for many, many years. I was invited in May this year to give a keynote address at the AAA show in Guangzhou this year, which I went up there. What an amazing industry China is. It's they've got over 4,000 FECs in China, and Guangzhou is the major centre, and the industry occupies this huge business park in Guangzhou, and I understand there are 800 companies that have offices or showrooms in that business park in China. Goodness. Can you imagine that? It's such a massive industry, and yet the industry is, because of the intense competition in the industry, it's really struggling domestically because competition has forced the price per play, generally speaking, in China is about 5 cents. Which you just can't make money at that level. And they're struggling to improve that. But I think the industry, the content production side of the industry relies mainly on exports. But this latest 100% additional tariff imposition, which the Trump administration announced last week, is going to make it pretty tough for the Chinese manufacturers, that's for sure. So they're going to have to try and compensate by building other markets. And there are other India is a hugely developing market. India today has more population than China. And China has 4,000 FECs, and India at this stage has less than 400. So that's going to be a huge growth market, both in terms of FECs, which is a very fast-growing market. I think our business, we're opening something like 20 new stores every year in India, but it's also developing some intellectual property in the content development area as well, which I think you'll start to see a lot more product coming out of India, where historically it's been virtually non-existent. So, if you look at history, this business started in the US. When I started in the 1950s, late 1950s, all of our equipment suppliers were US based. And then when Sega and Namco and Taito started developing product in Japan, it shifted towards Japan and then into South Korea and Taiwan. And when we left China in 2003, I think it was, or 4, there were manufacturers in China, but almost non-existent. But in that short period of 21, 22 years, China is now the dominant force in content production. No question about it. Even the US manufacturers, like Raw Thrills are licensing manufacturers like Walap in China to produce their products for the China and Asian market. So China is definitely the dominant player in our business right now, even though the FEC domestic industry is really doing it tough right there, right now. Yeah.
Since you brought it up, I did note that your, correct me if I'm wrong, your grandparents were Jewish Russians that immigrated to Australia. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And so your grandmother, was her name Malka, or I know that's where the name came from.
My grandmother, my paternal grandmother on my father's side, her name was Malka, and that's why we named the family foundation Malka Foundation. Yeah. Oh. She was the entrepreneur of the family. When they came out here in the early 1900s, her husband was a cabinet maker. And she used to buy up these derelict houses and renovate them. Her husband used to do a lot of the renovation work, and then they'd rent them out and sell them, and then buy other house. So she was the she was the entrepreneurial spirit of our family, and I never met her because when she was 40, she went into hospital to have a hysterectomy and died.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, and that never happens these days, but in those days it did. So she had a very short life, so I never met her, and but I've always believed that she is the entrepreneurial spirit in our family, and that's why, as I said, we named the foundation after her.
And what a great way to honor her.
Yeah. I recently had her grave renovated here in Perth because it's been there since 1928, I think.
Well, my wife's best friend lives in Sydney, so I've been there a couple of times.
Oh yeah,
just because we go visit, and haven't made it over to Perth. I had to look up where Perth was. You're on the other side of the country.
yeah. Well, we often describe it as being 6,000 miles east of Madagascar. It's very isolated. I mean, a Perth-Sydney trip is like Los Angeles, New York.
Right.
In square miles, we're pretty much the same size as the US mainly. And so it's a big country. We're only 27 million people, but there's a lot of land here.
That's beautiful. What have I failed to mention? We're still learning our way here in this podcast world.
Okay, I did make some notes to see if I missed anything.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, I think I've told you just about everything I wanted you to know. So I can't think of anything else other than to say, I have a lot of confidence in the future of the industry. I think there's a lot of growth there, particularly with modern technology. We're going to see some extraordinary things happen in the next decade or two. I hope I'm around for as long as possible to see it happen, but.
Well, I hope you are too. You've got you certainly have a lot to continue to contribute to the industry, and it's immeasurable what you've contributed up to this point.
Yeah, well, I've enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed this discussion today, Randy. It's been good to talk to somebody that knows the business, and I've also enjoyed your interviews with several other industry people that I've known. In fact, I think everybody that you've interviewed, I know personally. I've been in the business that long, so it's refreshing to hear their stories as well. It brings back a lot of great memories.
Well, I just have a great seat here because I get to hear them all firsthand, and researching the folks we're talking to. It's just, and to get the stories, technology, to your point, is such that this is easy. This is easy. And just to get stories like yours that are memorialized forever, well, this is fantastic. And the folks at RePlay couldn't be more supportive. I hope you enjoyed Eddie's part one and part two.
He's an absolute icon.
He's the best. He's the best.
That in his head, there's more about the history of the industry in his head than any other person on the planet. That guy, he's a publisher extraordinaire. He's just a remarkable individual, and he's so on the ball at 86. He's amazing, that he's so focused on what's going on. He knows everything that's happening, and I'm sure he's going to be involved for many years to come.
Well, it's just been a real pleasure, Malcolm. Thank you for taking the time, and I'm sure everybody's really going to enjoy hearing your story. So,
well, thank you, Randy, for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Game over.